Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most unethical thing you have seen someone do for a lawsuit and won? If you enjoy this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing. I started out working for a commercial law firm advising companies on environmental compliance. We had a client who was a large oil and gas distributor which owned a contaminated site in a populated area. My boss advised the client to transfer ownership of the site to a newly incorporated limited liability company with no assets. That way, when the government ordered the site to be remediated, the client wouldn't be liable for the cleanup. I left not too long after that. For a year I worked for the most unethical attorney I have ever met. Here are my top 2 stories. He took on a client that was injured at work. He sent him to a doctor that he would refer to as a whore. Since the attorney normally does defense work, the doctor came back saying the injury was clearly not work related. The attorney called the doctor to inform him that he represented the employee and not the employer in this case. The doctor then wrote a report that the injury was clearly work related. One afternoon the attorney's assistant ran into my room and said I need to go to the courthouse right now to defend the attorney in a traffic case. Attorney told me he had no run-ins with law enforcement before, had never been ticketed before, and would just like to get supervision. I go in front of the judge and present this information and I get him supervision. I go back to the office and curiosity got the best of me. I searched his criminal record. Yeah, turns out he had another outstanding speeding ticket and you could see his mugshot for domestic violence. Oh, and he tried to fine me $5,000 for going to a doctor's appointment on my lunch break. Yup, at that point I literally walked out. Obligatory, not a lawyer, but my parents got caught up in a slimy lawyer's talons. Basically, they had carpet installed in their house in 2005, paid in cash, got a receipt, and went on with their lives. 7 years later, they get a letter from some law firm saying the company they'd had install their carpet never received payment and would press charges if they didn't pay up. My dad, being the paranoid person he is, had kept the receipt and said he'd see them in court. He did some research, found out what the attorney can and can't do in this situation, and also found out that the attorney had been working with the flooring company for years, accusing paying customers of not paying and collecting excess money from them under threat of lawsuit. Fast forward to the court date. Dad shows up knowing his rights, with the receipt stating exactly how much he paid and when. Attorney has nothing except a copy of the invoice for my dad's payment that he leaves in his folder the whole time. Not only does the attorney break almost every rule of court possible, he completely slanders my dad, calling him sketchy looking and dishonest, even though the receipt is literally right there in front of him, insists that the receipt is fake despite having a copy of the invoice. Real shitty stuff. My dad lost that case. Before anyone had even left the courtroom, the attorney walked up to chat with the judge, who asked if they were still on for brunch tomorrow. Because it was a super small circuit, this dude had been able to buddy up to a judge to the extent he was allowed to do basically whatever he wanted and still win his cases. A year later my parents sued the attorney for misconduct and requested an out-of-circuit judge, who essentially told that slimy schmuck to sit the F down and shut the F up when he tried to pull something against the rules. They won that case. When I was working as a public defender in the Detroit State Court, I routinely saw cops lie about the existence of video recordings of an event. The law says they have to have the cams running when they make a stop, but in all the cases I saw not a single cop was ever able to produce a video. Either the video had malfunctioned, been accidentally deleted after the event, or the camera was broken. It was a weird place to work. The cops very much viewed the defense lawyers and the legal process as their enemy. I'm sure there were a lot of unjust outcomes as a result. In-N-Out Burger sued my company for using their name. We have a similar name and are in a state that doesn't have an In-N-Out Burger, and we are in the automotive industry. In-N-Out Burger purchased a body shop so they could tell the court that they too were in the automotive industry. Mind you, they bought it after they sued us and were looking like they were going to lose. We won the lawsuit. It's important for everybody in this thread to understand that criminal defense attorneys justify defending people that are obviously guilty by ensuring that they receive a fair and just trial. For example, a good friend of mine defended a drug dealer who was picked up by the police with a brick of coke in his car, and the guy was eventually found not guilty. I asked him how he can justify defending somebody who was obviously guilty, and he explained that the court dismissed the evidence of the cocaine because the police obtained it illegally, and after that the state didn't really have a case against the guy. In a situation like that, it's almost humbling to know that the system works in a sense that illegal police seizure cannot be used as evidence against somebody in a court. Sure, there are lawyers who do slimy and illegal things to get people out of trouble, but the majority of lawyers are good people who do everything within the realm of the law to make sure that their clients get a fair trial, and you would absolutely want the same done for you if you were indicted for a crime. Everybody hates lawyers until they need one. So the rest of the video is just one case. It starts out at about 100 and ends at about 10,000 with your blood boiling. Enjoy. Not a lawyer, but I know of a pretty messed up case. It's kind of a two-parter. Lesbian woman I knew got married, and everyone thought the two women were happy. Turns out, lesbian's wife was a con artist who was essentially gay for pay, until her real fiancé, who was on board with this whole plan, had been at his job long enough for benefits to kick in. His employer at the time did not provide benefits until after at least a year of employment. Real fiancé had been unemployed for a long time, hence the long con with lesbian woman. She needed to suck the woman in and then get married so that she could get on the lesbian's insurance, and also to convince her to pay for a phone. Literally those were the only two reasons the female con artist was with the lesbian: health insurance and a cell phone. Lesbian and female con artist get married at the beginning of summer. So, real fiancé gets his employee benefits about 7 months into the marriage of female con artist and lesbian. Meanwhile, this whole time, female con artist is cheating, if you could really call it that, since she was never really loyal to lesbian, on her wife with real fiancé. So, once real fiancé gets his benefits, female con artist tells lesbian, "I was only with you for the insurance and a phone," and bounces. Female con artist files for divorce, and lesbian is told by all law enforcement and every lawyer she consults that there is nothing she can do about basically getting conned because 1. Con artist used her real name on all the documents, so the marriage wasn't fraudulent, and 2. You would have purchased those things for your spouse anyway, so you have no real damages to sue for. So, basically lesbian is heartbroken and completely screwed over, since there were no kids, and the marriage lasted less than a year. Divorce was final in some ridiculously short time, like a month. It may have been an annulment. Flash forward 2 months later, we get a call from lesbian's mother. She's on the way to the hospital because she was just notified that lesbian had been raped and was in the middle of getting a rape kit done. The story she told the cops was that she had been driving down the road and someone posing as a cop was following her, eventually pulled her over and raped her in the backseat of her own car on the side of some famously poorly lit road. Well, cops start investigating. Lesbian's whole story starts to unravel when they check the surveillance footage at a gas station that she would have had to pass by before turning onto the poorly lit road where the rape allegedly took place, only to discover that not only had nobody been following her, but she was the only car to drive in that direction for over 45 minutes. But her rape kit came up positive. How could that be, you ask? Cops did some digging and found a profile lesbian had made on some dating site. They get a warrant and find out she made plans to hook up with some guy. They track him down, and he tells them everything he knows. He made plans to meet up with this woman, who turned out to be a lesbian. He met online, and as they are getting ready to have sex, and a few times during, she kept asking, "Have you ever had your DNA taken? Ever had it tested? Are you sure you've never had your DNA tested?" etc. Side note, that part is proof that no guy ever thinks clearly when he wants to get laid. Back to the story. So, cops take a sample of dating site guy's DNA to test against the DNA from the rape kit. It's a match. Cops figure out that lesbian faked the rape by hooking up with this guy so there would be DNA. Said that the person impersonated a cop as a plausible reason why she would have pulled over where she did, and tried to say it happened somewhere that everyone knew there would be no direct evidence of her being there. The final question remained, why go through all that though? Cops confront lesbian very carefully. They don't want it to seem like they don't believe her just because she's a lesbian, even though they have proof that she has been lying this whole time. When confronted, lesbian admits everything: the dating site profile, setting up dating site guy, lying, everything. Cops ask her why. She tells them about female con artist, and somehow she reasoned with herself that if she suffered some sort of tragedy, like a rape, then female con artist would come back and get back together with her. Like someone who conned you so intimately would really care, even if she really had been raped. She is initially arraigned very quickly, and in the intervening time it turns out that the cops tracked down female con artist and got a statement from her. For some reason, female con artist is in the courtroom when lesbian is there getting arraigned. Now remember, the fake rape happened just 2 months after the divorce/annulment. This arraignment was maybe a month after the initial rape report was filed, so figure 3 months since they last saw each other as a supposedly committed lesbian couple. Female con artist is 7.5 months pregnant. She got pregnant by real fiancé at the beginning of fall, so she was able to hide it under heavy sweaters and such. So, she was like 4.5 months pregnant when the original split with lesbian happened. To this day, nobody knows why female con artist was there during the arraignment. Okay, so the prosecution takes forever. For one reason or another, there were constant delays both by lesbian's lawyer and the prosecutor's office where this was happening. They were going to throw everything they could at lesbian because of all the money and manpower spent on the investigation. Plus it had been somewhat high profile in that town. Charges included manufacturing evidence, filing a false police report, obstruction of justice, and a bunch of others that I have forgotten. She was looking at 5 years in prison, easily. Finally, lesbian gets a lawyer to tell the prosecutor that if they don't let lesbian plead down to some ridiculous misdemeanor, then at trial they were going to make it look like she was only being prosecuted because she is a lesbian. It was an election year, and the district attorney was terrified of not getting re-elected, so they made the deal. She should have gotten at least 5 years in prison, but got off with a year probation. I know this, especially this last paragraph, because lesbian's mother, who was paying for the lawyer, and should have been offended by her daughter's actions, because mother was an actual rape victim, called my dad, and regularly kept him up to date. She was proud of the fact that they basically blackmailed the prosecutor into a deal. You guys can feel it too, right? The hot flash of WTF did I just hear? I can't even, honestly. See you tomorrow or right now somewhere else.